Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode about the movies with William Fletcher. As usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and this week I'm joined by a newcomer guest to the show, Mr. Michael Ashton.
Yeah, no, that's thank you, William, for having me here. Very much looking forward to getting stuck into Wuthering Heights.
Hmm. So just before we get into it, do you just want to sort of give your your sort of taste in film, like favorite films, like sort of how you sort of approach films like that? If you like anything, you sort of want to mention, sort of right away, or before we get into the film.
Y- Yeah, sure. Just to give an overview of that. Just to give some background information to me, I have done a bachelor in film and screen media production, um, as well as done a master's in teaching for secondary education. So, analyzing film is something that I really love doing, and it all comes down to me because obviously we've all heard the adage, art is subjective, and so for me it's about trying to get all my knowledge using all the approaches that one has to film and applying it when I'm watching something. I'm going, do I feel like what the do I can I grasp what the intention of the film is and whether they made the best version of that intention, whether it be in terms of ambition, in terms of filmmaking, in terms of scope, in terms of storytelling, in terms of character. I try and I try and find the thing, like the reason why this film is being made. And sometimes it can be very cynical. It could be, in terms of a cash grab, or, trying to like be the most cynical version of something. Or if I can sense that the filmmakers are actually really passionate about the story and have a take to it, that's what I'm wanting to see respond to it. I want to feel the passion of those filmmakers. And so in terms of favorite films, in terms of filmmakers, I really love Christopher Nolan. I think that's my go-to guy. I really love Danny Boyle, a lot of his films. In terms of old filmmakers, I don't know, Wim Wenders, Billy Wilder, a lot of these filmmakers who I sense that their passion is there, or they're trying to not so much break the mold, but do the best version of their story. So for me, and also another thing as well, story doesn't necessarily have to take, isn't the most, how should I say this? Isn't always the most important thing. I'm not sure if you agree with this or not, but sometimes you don't watch a movie for the plot. You don't watch the movie for a character. Sometimes vibes is okay. So it all depends on what I think the movie is trying to do.
I mean, occasionally I get into like movies because of the vibes, but it's very rare that
Mm.
I do. This week we are looking at Wuthering Heights, because there is a new adaptation by Emerald Fennell out very soon. So we'll talk about that at the end of this because there's been some controversies around it. Now, I did intend to read the book before this record. I did not get an opportunity to finish reading it, but I believe, did you say you had read the book?
Yes, I read the book back around August, September time last year.
I mean, yeah, just sort of quickly, what do you like? Do you like the book, or
I think that the book is a very interesting story in that it's a story about how prejudice can and class and all these very superficial things can really cloud people's relationships with each other. How wealth can pretty much be kind of, this stopping of romance, of connection, and
Mhm.
to get into the story of it all. That's kind of what centers around the story with Heathcliff. because this character is starting off in the novel. He is a foundling. He is somebody who is picked up by the Earnshaw family, and he grows up with Catherine Earnshaw, who is played by Margot Robbie in the new film. And they grew up together. They form a bond with each other, and as soon as they discover or they start to feel the pressures of social convention, that's when their relationship starts to stray. That's when
Mhm.
we start to see a lot of the characters start to be very cruel to each other. It's kind of a coming of age film in that. I'm sorry, a coming of age story in that way. And what I've really liked, people keep on saying, and especially with the like a lot of the advertising for this new film, it's saying the greatest romance of all time. I don't think this story is romantic in any way.
Mm.
I think that
I
this
I
is a
was
film.
gonna yeah, I was gonna say is I don't like just based on the marketing, I'm like, is that the right move for it? Like it feels almost like when It Ends With Us was coming out and Blake Lively was trying to sort of sell it as like a fun time at the cinema that like you go see with your girlfriends or whatever. And I'm like, it seems like the wrong take to have.
Yeah, because for this story, as I said, it is about generational cyclical abuse and how that comes in response to the forms of wealth and class. And I think to get into the new version of it by Emerald Fennell, I think that she's spoken about this in the press, saying that she is wanting to do the version that she saw of the novel that she had in mind when she first read it, which is not an invalid take. But I do think that from the visuals that we've seen of it so far, and it looks gorgeous. I think it looks absolutely incredible visually, and the cinematographer Linus Sandgren, who's also done he did the lenses for La La Land, First Man, the last Bond film. He's going to be doing the next Dune film. I think he's one. I think he's probably the best cinematographer working today that's not named Roger Deakins. Um, but I do feel like Emerald Fennell is also trying to chase a trend in like this whole like in this post Bridgerton world of showing this polite society can get kinky as well. If you don't mind me, I'm venturing into there. But the whole point of polite society is that they're supposed to be repressed. I'm not too sure if you've seen too many costume dramas or not, but if you watch films like Age of Innocence, it's all about repression. It's all about how social convention stifles emotions. And I don't feel like Emerald Fennell is wanting to do that, which kind of goes against what Wuthering Heights is supposed to be.
I mean, I personally find sort of period, costume dramas to be very, very boring. Um,
Yeah, I can see that.
I
Yeah.
generally find that the ones that I like are the ones that very much sort of subvert the conventions of the genre. For me, I just find the setting and the characters in it to be very, very dull and not particularly interesting. Like I don't really like The Age of Innocence, if I'm being completely honest. I think it's very boring and it doesn't really do much for me. And I just think, yeah, there's something about it that doesn't really click with me. In a way that it clearly does for a lot of, like my mum enjoys period dramas, but I don't. So I don't know if it's a generational thing or something because my mum, loves stuff like Downton Abbey and
Mhm.
um, that kind of thing. So it's yeah, I don't know. It's just something about it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, because I wouldn't say I've gotten into costume dramas or anything like that as of like haven't seriously gotten into it. Like for me, I haven't seen Downton Abbey, but I did watch um that parody film that was really, I think it's actually coming out soon, but I watched it during the British Film Festival, Fackham Hall, which is kind of a
Mm,
send up parody of, Downton Abbey, where uh it's after spending so many years courting, she finally found the right cousin, just things like
mm,
that. That's kind of a send up of that. But also, as I'm saying, what I was trying to find an in with these costume dramas. I was trying to find what is the angle that
mm,
I can respond to with these films, and I think it was the two films that I responded to really well. One of them was Age of Innocence, which I love that film because it is about the aching of the heart of how you want to stray away from social convention. The heart is aching to just be done with these people who are just social backstabbers, but also you wanting to just be free from that. And also another film that I kind of really got into it was a film called Remains of the Day, with Anthony Hopkins and Emma
oh, yeah.
Thompson. Kind of, yeah, and how that film was about this uptight man who realized that because of how uptight he was, he kind of he shut off like making connections. He shut off from even understanding that, oh my god, I might have I might be in the service of a Nazi sympathizer in this house. And then years later, when he tries to make connections again with people, you can't seem to do it. And it's showing how we like these costume drums. As I said, it's about polite society. It's about these people who, there's a psychological aspect to it, because we're trying to be decent, we're trying to be kind to one another, but then in the face of conflict, how do we respond? Do we respond with outrage, or do we just let that bitterness, that anger, just eat away at us? And that's the inner turmoil of these characters, and how it all works. And for me, I find that absolutely riveting, and kind of is what it is at the heart of Wuthering Heights.
So to get into the 1939 film is the one we're going to be sort of focusing on today. Best Picture nominee, which I mean, it makes sense. It seems like something that would appeal to the Academy voters. So yeah, I watched it yesterday, and
Hmm.
I don't know. I didn't find myself that like I don't know. I just didn't find it particularly engaging. And I don't know if it's because it's a romance from the 30s, and so it's just it's a lot of melodrama, but it's not particularly interesting melodrama. And also, I was just reading that it's only like part of the story, is what I've read. Is that like
Yes,
it's
yes.
only like
So
half the book?
yes. So, what's interesting about these adaptations of Wuthering Heights, and what I suspect the new film will take the approaches as well, is that the story is split. Well, it's structured very like it's structured in a way. I'll get to that soon if I can, but essentially the whole story is kind of two stories in one, which is it's told from the perspective. It covers, the first half is when we get introduced to Heathcliff and Catherine and their um, friendship, and what that their connection, that what that turns into. And then you get Catherine marrying, I believe it's, I always get these names confused. I believe it's the Linton buying wedding into the marrying into the Linton family, and how that creates tensions there between the Linton family and Heathcliff. And um, and it covers that part of the story. The second half of the story, for those of you who have seen any version of Wuthering Heights, whether it be the 1939 version, um, or even I think the 2011 version, which I haven't seen, I still need to watch that. And I guess spoiler alerts. I guess. I mean, should I reveal it at the end? Should I reveal what happens at the end of this film? Because I suspect that the new film will cover the first half as well. Do you want me
I
to
mean,
say?
it's a book from the 1800s, so it's kind of
Yeah,
like I mean, I personally don't have a problem because I will try and read the book before I go see the new one, so I'll know what it is anyway. So I mean, personally, if you're listening to this and you like do care about spoilers, just like skip ahead a few minutes because
yeah.
like we
So
talk about
yeah.
spoiler stuff here all the time, so it's not like a problem.
Yeah. So, spoilers for that. Catherine dies, which is the Margot Robbie character in the new film. And so, what happens then is it then fast forwards years later, where the child of Catherine, Kathy, she's named Kathy. She grows up with the Lintons, and then she then rediscovers well, she doesn't rediscover. She does discover the man who lives at Wuthering Heights and how that man may or may not be her father and all of that. So the second half is all about how that generation, uh, that abuse can continue on if
Okay.
and how yeah and how that cycle can continue and how even from somebody like Heathcliff who came from nowhere, and this is what I'm going to be talking about with when we get to the Jacob Elordi of it all, how
Mm,
this man who was born from nothing, or he came from nothing, can now be filled with so much hate and prejudice because of the hate and prejudice that was placed upon him. It's a revenge story. It's a tale of how prejudice begets prejudice,
mm,
and he's wanting to gain revenge back because of the death of Catherine on the Lintons through their child. And it
okay.
and yeah, and that's the second half of the story. And that's not covered in the 1939 version. So the only version that I know of it, other than I think some TV movies, that does cover that does cover that half of the novel, is the 1992 version with Ray Fiennes and Juliette Binoche. And what's interesting in that version is that the young Kathy is both Kathy and Catherine Linton is portrayed by Juliette Binoche. So she's playing both um, the um, the lover, for lack of a better word, of Heathcliff, and the daughter of Heathcliff, which is some psychological thing going on there. And with the first Wuthering Heights from 1939, just to bring it back to that, that film, because I watched it, I did watch it as soon as I finished the novel, and going into that, I'm kind of glad that I knew it only covered the first half because then I'd get to the end, I'd be like, what? But I think what it does manage to retain in terms of the book's messaging is how class and racial divides, as I've mentioned, creates prejudice, especially between two people who are in love. And you say that it's boring, and I kind of get that. But I think that this is the film that actually kind of nails the gothic the gothic texture of the novel from Bronte's words. I feel like the cinematography in this film, the way that it deals in shadow, there does feel like a ghostly presence lurking throughout the film, and I think that's what makes this version of it stand out to me.
Because the way the Wuthering Heights the film ends, it felt I don't know. From like they basically just sort of walk away. Like, well, no, because he's being like was it haunted or like
Who's been haunted by, I guess, the ghost of Catherine.
yeah, which is interesting because I didn't feel like any of the rest of the film was sort of like had that kind of element to it, which was so it was a bit yeah. I don't know. I think it felt it didn't like the ending didn't really it wasn't a particularly satisfying ending. I didn't find to talk about the film a bit more deeply. So I mean, we were going to have to get into this at some point. But Laurence Olivier as Heathcliff. I mean, who would have thought they would still be whitewashing this character decades
Yeah.
later? Yeah, I mean, we might as well get into it now because it's kind of
Sure.
hard not to talk about it. So I there's a lot of sort of people who aren't that big a fan of Emerald Fennell and her work. I like I thought Saltburn was very good. I really liked Promising Young Woman. There was a bit of a when it was announced she was doing an adaptation of Wuthering Heights, people were not happy. I remember before even like casting had come out, people were very not a fan of her as director and writer, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, I believe she's the writer on this as well. And then the casting came out and it was going to be uh Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie as the two leads, and I remember there was an instant like people were very upset with Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff because the character is well they don't explicitly say what do they in the book they don't explicitly say what his race is, do they, or do they?
So, what it is in the novel, I don't remember the exact description of it, but the whole point of the character of Heathcliff is that he is supposed to be, and this is hinted at particularly in the 1939 version, is that his race is ambiguous, that he might have come from a land so far away that he might have himself might have been born into royalty, that he might have been the Prince of India, or he might have been, some, he could have been a count of Spain or something like that. And
Hmm,
the fact that he has now been plucked from that and put into the moors of Yorkshire, I believe it's Yorkshire, and
yeah, I'm kind of like
and
yes.
yeah, and been faced with this amount of prejudice, and he has now been raised full of the victim of hatred. That is to show how class and race can affect that. That feeds into the themes of it. And so you've got these versions of the character with Laurence Olivier, with Ray Fiennes. You've got Jacob Elordi. Now, I will say this: the performances themselves, when you look
Mhm,
at the performances themselves, they
mhm,
have a grasp on who Heathcliff is. I do agree with that. They understand the character that is being presented to them, and I do think that
mhm,
they do a good job with the performances, particularly with Ray Fiennes. Where if you watch that film, Ray Fiennes knows
mhm,
when passion can cross a passion, particularly his obsession with Catherine, how that can cross into villainy. And I really
mhm,
liked how he refused to assign a lot of redeeming qualities to Heathcliff, because when it's all said and done, Heathcliff is a villain, but he is a villain that was sculpted. And part of that is the suffering of racial prejudice.
mhm,
By removing that quality from these performances, it loses some of that that thematic sustenance, that some of that essence that is very much baked into the narrative of the story. And the fact that we're still doing this, I feel like is it's I just don't understand that. Look, I'm sure Jacob Elordi, and particularly after Frankenstein, which I went into that film and I went, oh, oh my, I was not expecting this kind of gear from you, Jacob Elordi. I was actually really impressed with his performance in that film.
Mm,
And to see a new version of this and it's just a lily white guy,
mm.
it's 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 just so disheartening that we're not willing to actually tackle those themes. And hell, for a modern audience, for a contemporary audience who are far more aware of these prejudices that are being displayed the world over.
I think, yeah, it's very questionable to cast, because I don't. It's yeah, no, it's very very weird, and I don't. It's not particularly justified uh,
No.
by any stretch of the imagination. It's yeah, it's I don't understand what the justification like because in the 30s version I could kind of be like, well, it's not good, but it's also like it doesn't exactly surprise me because it was the 1930s.
Mm.
Like it doesn't surprise me that they cast a white guy instead of a black act. Like it doesn't surprise me. It's just like I don't know why this is still a thing we're doing in 2026. Like it is such a weird decision, and I don't know if like they've said anything on it of why it's Jacob Elordi, because I feel like that would just create a ton of even more backlash if they did.
Mm. Because looking down the list of people who have played Heathcliff, listen to this. So we got Laurence Olivier, Richard Burton played him at one point, Timothy Dalton played him, Tom Hardy, he played in a version of that, I think from 2009. Ray Fiennes, and a few other actors who I don't know of, and then there's Jacob Elordi. So I can understand the attraction for some of these actors of this caliber, why they would see this character and they would want to play it. I understand it completely, but the desire to have those actors and go, oh yeah, throw them into the role. It's like I was thinking about this the other day. Who would have been a good alternative for this new film? Because also we've got to say this as well. This Jacob Elordi he has had success, but he has not proven himself as a box office draw. He's only been
No.
in he's only been in TV. He's only been in Euphoria. He was in The Kissing Booth, but that was a Netflix film. He has not proven himself to be a leading man in any of these films. And I was thinking to myself the other day, who would have been a really good choice to be in this film instead? And I thought, do you know the actor Daryl McCormick?
Yeah, he was in the recent Knives Out.
Yes, he was. Yes, and well, for one thing, he's older than Jacob Elordi. He's more in close to age with Margot Robbie, and two, he kind of fits that bill of somebody who he's an Irish actor, so it would have fit to that. And also, I don't want to go into too much, on this, but he can possibly have someone, particularly with his eyes, having someone who is racially ambiguous,
Mm.
um, or more well compared to Jacob Elordi. So, and I think that's kind of the point of the characters that they could have come from anywhere, and I just think hiring Jacob Elordi, and I say this as a guy, Jacob Elordi's a Brisbane boy. I'm glad
Yeah.
he's finding sad. Yeah, I'm glad he's finding success. I just don't think this is the right fit for him. And for me, look, maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe once we finally see it, once the new one comes out, maybe we'll be proven wrong, and he'll be fantastic. It doesn't take away the fact that you are missing a vital piece of the themes by casting a white guy. And I think
Mm,
that's just I just think that's very disheartening.
mm. Yeah, it is a massive, a very much a missed opportunity. Yeah, like look, I am sure he will probably give like a good performance. Like I don't I think he's a decent actor. I can imagine he'll do a good job. It just feels like the wrong choice. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like the right choice. And I mean, to be honest, I don't even like. I like Margot Robbie, but I also don't know if she necessarily should be in this. Like, I don't know how old the characters are meant to be, but in my mind, they're not particularly old. Like the main two, they're
Yeah.
not like massively old, and like Margot Robbie's like 30 something.
Yes, and the also I'll say this about the characters, particularly with Heathcliff. We don't know how old he is. We know that when the novel starts out, he is young, but he does not know how old he thinks he is. Um,
Mhm,
we see them growing up together. We don't know if he's older than Catherine. We don't know if he's younger than Catherine. We don't know that. So, but we can
mhm,
imagine that they are probably around the same age because they're both children. In the novel, Catherine, once again, spoilers, dies at the age of 18. And I think the character of Kathy Linton, the child, I believe we see that child as, I think, 8 years old in the novel when it gets to that point in the story. So at this point, you've got to think that Heathcliff, probably when he's like 30, is when he actually dies, um, as
mhm,
shown at the end of the 1939 film. So yeah, it's so we're having to try and to buy, and clips have already been released for this film where Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie are trying to come across as teenagers, and it just feels like two people playing dress up.
mhm. Yeah, that was something I did find kind of interesting. Is it's like when you watch a show or a film set in high school and they've got like these actors in their mid 20s to nearly like Tobey Maguire meant to be like a 18-year-old
Yeah,
in that first Spider-Man film, and it's like he's nearly 30. Like it
yeah.
doesn't work. But I mean, to be fair, with the cast of the 30s version, they're not especially well.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just yeah,
Not
like Laurence
particularly.
Olivier is was born in like 1907, so he was like over he was 30 something at the like 32 or something, also which is too old arguably.
Yeah, I think it
um
might have been about 34 or 35 when he did the film.
yeah, so that's old for that role. And I've just looked. This was, but to talk about the 30s one again specifically, directed by William Wyler.
Hmm.
I don't know if I mean, I know the name. I'm very aware of him. I don't know if I've seen any of his other films though, even though he's
You haven't seen Ben-Hur, you haven't seen Roman Holiday, you haven't seen Best Years of
no,
Our Lives.
no.
Man,
It appears like this is the only one of his films I have seen.
well, it's a good start. If like the five that
Yeah, I
I've
mean, I
seen
intend to watch. Yeah, no, I intend to watch these. Like, I've got a lot of his films in like my watch list to eventually. He's
mm.
got like three Best Picture winners. He's the director of.
Yes, he directed Ben-Hur, The Best Years of Our Lives, and Mrs. Miniver.
Yeah. One thing about this film that I didn't really think about until I read a review is that the story is set in sort of Yorkshire, in the
Mm.
UK, and it's very clearly shot in like California. It doesn't look anything like Yorkshire. It doesn't look like it's very like you know massive like deserts and stuff. Like it's just not um which is like obviously it's not going to help with immersion, but it also is like this was 1930s Hollywood. They kind of they filmed every movie in places like California and everything because there was just big open spaces where they could just film stuff because they didn't have the facilities per se, and it was just easier to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I'd make the argument they needed those spaces because there's a lot of people on a film set. So, and also, particularly with films like Wuthering Heights, I'm not necessarily lending too much in terms of realism to it because it is a gothic story after all. It is about ghosts. It's about um the ghosts of of memory
mm,
and all that. So there is a supernatural presence to it, but at the very heart of it, it is this story about generational abuse. So for me, I'm not going to ding it too much for that. And obviously, it was 1939, so we have to give it some leniency in terms of what we are able to be convinced by, and whether that background looks convincing enough. And yeah, I wasn't too fussed by that. And when you look at William Wyler's films, and particularly the cinematographer here, Greg Toland, who also was the cinematographer for Citizen Kane. Yeah.
I was just looking, and John Huston was apparently an uncredited writer on this film,
Okay.
which is interesting because I don't know why, but this doesn't quite seem like something he would have been involved in for whatever reason. I think this is the kind of film where I wouldn't say I think it's like a bad film. It's just it's not my cup of tea. Like it's not a film that I enjoy, like because it just doesn't appeal to me really, and that's not really like the film's fault per se. Like there are tons of films where I can be like I don't think it's bad, it's just like it's not my thing, and I think that's something that I think in general a lot of people sort of don't quite understand the difference between I don't like and is bad, like 'cause those are two very separate things. I see stuff where people say, "Oh, this is terrible," and blah blah blah, and I think there's nothing inherently wrong with disliking something or liking something I don't like. I just think there's a difference between not liking and it being bad because I don't think it's a bad film. Like in terms of how it's made, I think it's a very well made film. It's got very good cinematography. I think it's under 2 hours, which I think more films should maybe be under 2 hours that are not. But I was just not drawn to the film. And I think part of it is because, I like films from the 30s, from like the 30s, 40s, the 20s, But generally speaking, the films I like from that time period, they're not just sort of dramas about romance. They've got like genre elements. So they're about, they're like the Universal monster films, or they're like a murder
Hmm.
mystery, or they're animation, or they're comedies. I don't really connect with just very standard sort of dramas from the 30s because they don't, for some reason, they don't read like, I don't know. I think it's this thing of I don't know what it is because it's own because I think there's tons of films made nowadays that aren't real that don't have any genre elements to it, and I think they're in thoroughly engaging. The Florida Project, for example, is just the first film I immediately thought of. There isn't really a genre to it. It's a slice of life film. It's about a group of people, wanting to go to Disneyland. And it's a very good film, and there's a lot of great character to it, and emotion. And there's just something about it where there's something about old films from the 30s or so where they just don't seem to know how to do like human dramas for me. And I don't know why that is really.
Yeah, I think, and particularly we mentioned about Citizen Kane coming out 2 years after this film. I think that what you're describing, and I may be wrong on this, but a lot of the language of cinema, particularly at this time, was not yet solidified.
Mm,
There wasn't a lot in terms of understanding, what we could convey with the close up, what we could convey with a medium close up.
mm,
All these shots. I think that we at the time were still we did have close-ups. Like if you look at The Passion of Joan of Arc, like once again, that's another film that doesn't have a lot going on in it. It's a silent film, well, in terms of genre stuff. But when you watch the close-ups in that film, it is harrowing. The close-ups of the lead actress and looking into those eyes, and it's one of like between that and Metropolis, it's one of the most angriest films I've ever seen, and they were both silent films from the 20s. For
mm,
me, it's less, once again, it's about what do I think the filmmakers are trying to do, and I think history is an important aspect. Knowing how to read history, having is very good when watching these films, knowing where these films were at, like what the social climate, the political climate was at the time. What is informing these films? What's informing
mm,
films like, um, I don't know, modern times? What is
mm,
informing, um, I don't know, Stagecoach? These
mm,
it to have some semblance of history and what's informing it. I think it really benefits understanding what in the same way. I forgot who said this. I read it somewhere, but they said that they think that every Best Picture winner of a certain year is kind of a summation of where history was during that year.
I didn't find myself particularly engaged with it, and I didn't realize while I was watching, like I didn't realize until I was just reading for that. Yeah, it is only part of the story, which is interesting because I mean, I felt it was very on it, a very whatever, and like the ending didn't really leave much of an impression on me, but it also didn't feel like to me it didn't feel like, oh, that's a weird place to end it. I was just having a think about this. It is. I don't know if I'd say it's surprising, but I mean, I think it's a good thing, honestly, because it feels like if they would have, if they did want like to cast like a, have Heathcliff be, not white, they would have just done like blackface or something instead,
Sure.
which I think would have dated the film much worse. So yeah, but I mean, I think it's yeah, and I think Laurence Olivier is a very good actor. I think he's given some very very good performances. He's just sort of not the right fit for the role. Is there anything else about the film that you want to sort of touch on?
I've mentioned the reasons why I respond to it maybe a bit more than you do, and I think it's mainly from the cinematography with how it's able to capture that gothic texture. That was intended by Emily Bronte, and I think the film gets the book's messages on class and race right. I think it does it in a way that I think is successful, even though it is Laurence Olivier, who's not a man of he is white, but I do think that and especially with the new version coming out, and it's going to be very interesting to see how people respond to it. I do get the sense that Emerald Fennell, she does want to m- modernize it
Mm,
in and that's also another thing that particularly with watching the trailers, I there is no sex in the novel, at least that's not
mm,
written. And it
mm,
seems like all this new stuff, I feel like, is more in response to something like Bridgerton, where we are showing these people the stuff that they desire so hard and are never able to act on. We're actually getting that in this film, and I don't understand the intention behind that. These people are supposed to be
I
repressed.
think I've heard some people sort of saying and sort of questioning why this sort of new adaptation is trying to be very sort of erotic and sort of get you hot under the collar, as it were, which does feel a bit at odds with what the film seems, well, what like the book seems like it is. It's like it's not meant to make you um feel that way and sort of, so I do think it is an interesting choice, and it's gonna, I feel like, really bother a lot of people who love the book, because I know people who love the book and they are not looking forward to this film. They don't like, they don't think it looks very good, and they probably will end up not seeing it.
I want to see it. I'm saying this offhandedly, and I'm saying this begrudgingly. I want to see it because I want to see how much of a mess it is. Um,
Mm,
I want to see, and similar as you. I really loved Promising Young Woman. Saltburn is a very interesting film. I think Emerald Fennell has a lot of visual prowess. I think that she's very interesting with her visuals, and I'll even say, as I've mentioned before, the visuals of this film, it looks gorgeous. Linus
mm,
Sandgren knows how to shoot a film. I just
mm,
don't think that this is what Wuthering Heights, is about. I feel like it's antithetical, and I just feel like Emerald Fennell, she was wanting. She probably came to the studios and went, "Hey, you know how great Bridgerton is. You know how great all these other pieces of property where we actually get to see the sex happening. Well, guess what? I want to do that for Wuthering Heights, which I think is the complete wrong decision. So I'm curious to see how that's all portrayed in the film. I don't have high hopes for it, but I'm still going to see it nonetheless because who knows? Maybe it might be a good time, but not for the reasons Emerald Fennell probably wants it to be.
mm. Yeah, I mean, do you want to put a rating out of 10 on the 1939 Wuthering Heights before we wrap up? Unless there's any sort
Out
of
of
final things you want to say.
no, I'll give a rating to it. I'll give a rating to it. I mean, I'm just looking at my rating I gave it right now. Um, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10.
Mm,
8 out of 10. Um, I
mm.
do. I think it has the potential to go down 7.5 because it doesn't cover the entire novel.
Yeah,
But I
I
do.
was gonna, yeah, sort of ask, like, as an adaptation, like would you consider it like a good adaptation of the book?
I think it's a good adaptation when it just comes to that first half. I think
Mhm,
that hell, this could have been an epic. It could have been a 4-hour film if they decided to do the second half. I mean, they
mm,
did it in the 1992 version, so who knows? Maybe there could have been, might have been a 10 out of 10 if they just did that second half. But um, I do think that it gets the tone of the novel right.
mm,
I do think that it gets the look very much right for what we say, about whether Laurence Olivier, was miscast, or not the right choice, wrong choice. I think he gives a good performance in there.
Mhm.
I believe the relationship between Catherine and Heathcliff in this version. So yeah, I think it's very. I think it's an interesting adaptation more than it is a good one. Um,
Mm,
yeah, there's just yeah, I think it gets it mostly right.
mm. Um, I mean, for me, it's a 5 out of 10. It's just, yeah, very much not my thing. Um, I can see how it can be someone's thing, but I am, yeah, not that person, unfortunately. So it doesn't really have much for me to sort of latch onto and enjoy and get from it. I think it sort of it definitely I see how it appeals to people and why people can watch it and like it and get something from it. But I am, yeah, not that person. So yeah, I give it a 5, like, because it's not a badly made film. It's just not my kind of film. It's not my cup of tea. But yeah, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Michael, for joining me for this week's episode.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, William.
And I mean, if you're ever interested in coming on again as a guest, just let me know. Really, if you do want to come on again at some point, or if you don't, if you, this was a bad experience and you're like, I don't
Oh no,
really this,"
oh
you know?
no, no, no. I had a great time discussing this and seeing where you stood with it and the types of classic films
Yeah,
that you respond to. No, that this has been very interesting. No,
yeah.
loving this talk.
I
Thank
am,
you,
I am, I
William.
am, I am joking. But I think, yeah, no, there's a lot to like, because I think it is valuable to what, like, I saw a thing like last night from Sean Baker, and he was sort of like asked like, what advice would you give to sort of aspiring filmmakers, and he was just like, just watch everything, even if it's
Mm,
bad, watch it. Watch good films, watch bad films, and I think that's very important to, because I think some people are very snobby and sort of turn their nose up at films from certain time periods. Like, oh, it's black and white. Ugh, I'm not gonna watch, even though some of the best films ever made were made
yeah.
before color was like a thing. Some of those important and influential films, were in before color existed. So I don't think it's worth. I think it's all. I think being, there are films where I'm like, oh, this isn't really my genre, this isn't really my type of film, but I'll still watch it because I'm like, well, there
Mm,
might be something here, or it's, like, it's significant in some way in like film history, which is sort of how I look at films, the idea of watching anything and everything that is like culturally significant, for good reasons or bad reasons. I think it's worth watching just as many films as you can. If you like films, watch as many films as you can. This is None of this is important relevant. Thank you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.